Hey everybody, and welcome to the January Q&A for Patreon. I have a lot of questions to answer this time around. I have about 85 or so. Usually these run around 60, so I'm going to potentially end this early and do a part 2 just in case I don't have the time tonight to finish them all. We'll see what happens. So I'm going to jump into it and we'll go from there. Some of these questions may be repeats from previous Q&As, so if that happens, I'll briefly touch on it and just basically you can go back and listen to the back catalog of these if you really want to, but let's get into it. Ian Pellerin asks, "Hey fat boy, can you do 15 push-ups on camera for us? Thanks and stay well." Well, I could, but right now this camera has a loose battery, so I have a elastic band around it, and I'm trying to hold it in place so that it doesn't fall out and suddenly shut the camera off. The camera could shut off at any time. I don't know when, but if it does, what may pop up on the screen is what you saw in the previous Bloodborne video, where my wife and my newborn will be there for a second. So if that happens, I'll just replace the battery and we'll keep going. So there may be an awkward cutoff. So yeah, I'm not going to move the camera. But less fat. I'm less fat. Lost 12.5 pounds on this diet. Not bad. I stopped eating so much ice cream sandwiches from anxiety, trying to get through to the other side. Drew Bartlett says, "What was the last thing you stole?" A package of American cheese that I stuffed down my pants when I was 18 years old or something like that, because I was stealing it for something, whatever. I was a dumb kid. And yeah, I had some cheese on my penis, and then that way I got busted. So I didn't actually steal it. That was when I got into a lot of trouble, not because of the cheese. Christian Venson says, "I'm curious on how to choose projects. How do you narrow down the ideas to a manageable number?" Since you said ideas, I'm assuming you're talking about personal projects, so I will go over that. If you're talking about client stuff, I'll say that, and maybe this will just apply to other people who are curious about this, I choose what I can take on to this limit where there's a cutoff. At that cutoff, I know that if I take on more than this, then the work will suffer. I need to, at the end of the day, deliver work that's good. If I can't deliver work that's good because I took on too much stuff, it's a problem. So whenever that's the case, I do not take on more. That comes through experience. You'll figure out what that number is for you by working a lot, but that's my cutoff. As far as personal projects go, I probably have about 5 in the back of my mind at all times. When I'm working on one, I'm only doing that. Tunnel vision. When I'm doing Steve Lichman, I'm pretty much only doing Steve Lichman. Like I mentioned it before in previous Q&As and things, but the first and second Steve Lichman volumes were a straight shot through. So worked on Steve Lichman Volume 2 over the course of about 10 months. Got the whole book done. It's 435 pages. So a lot of work went into it. And yeah, that was the big thing with that, was just go all the way through. Don't stop till it's done. I have a real problem with when I start something, stopping it. I know that if I stop it, I may never start it again. So I just have to rip the Band-Aid off and just get through it. So I try to keep ideas in the back. So if I have projects open in the back of my mind, I'll take notes throughout whatever, like the year. I will always be thinking of things and writing stuff down, and just for when it comes up and I do want to spend the time and actually make it. But yeah, when I'm working on a thing, I'm working on a thing. And when things are just ideas, I try to let them live back there in my mind and evolve over time. Sometimes I find something eventually, and then I'm like, oh, cool, that's what I was waiting for. That happened just recently. I was listening to Jack Reacher audiobooks because I thought it'd be funny. And I came up with an idea for what I would do with the old property that I was working on called Jack Threat. So hopefully that comes together because I think that it was funny. It's a way to kind of take the Garfield stuff that I was doing, the Garfield comics, the jokes and whatever, and apply that to something that's purely my own. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. Hopefully it works out. Danny says, what is the best way you have found to practice anatomy? The way that I used to do it was I would take a book like Andrew Loomis's anatomy books, look at how he broke down anatomy. I would copy it from the book. I would shut the book, turn to a new page in my sketchbook, and see how much of that I could take from my memory and apply. Because then I would know exactly how much of the information I was retaining, which was really important for me because it's so easy to just copy and not think. So it got me into the habit of thinking while I studied a thing and copied from the reference. And then later on, if I worked on my personal work, I would then apply what I learned from the anatomy into what I was doing for myself or for a client and try to recall the muscle groups and things and just do my best. If I couldn't figure it out, I would reference something. But that's how I tried to get things down. Repetition is key. You draw a whole lot. When I drew comics, that's when things really started to solidify for me. That was when I suddenly started to see like a big increase in my knowledge, especially in like hands and general anatomy. I still have issues, but yeah, I'm working through them and I'm always referencing and trying to learn and grow. But yeah, that's how I do it. What I would say as far as a way that I would do it now, I would probably look at Manga Materials. Manga Materials has a lot of great reference for anatomy. Look them up on Google. I also retweet this one Twitter account that has color breakdowns of the anatomical structure of arms and legs and things and different poses. So I would look at that as well. It's similar to Manga Materials, but it's just free resource that's on Twitter. I would study those because I feel like as far as a breakdown goes, it's much easier to see how everything fits together because it's color coded. So it's a simpler read for me. And I currently use those if I really have an issue building up the muscles in my characters and things. I think that they're a really great resource. Gnome God says, hey Dave, hope you're well. Have you played Hades yet? I can't stop playing. Nope, I haven't played any video games in a while because I have my son who's 2 months old and then my other son who's just getting closer to 2 years old, but not quite there yet. Be 2 in May. So haven't been able to do much of anything else besides work. Trying to save up for a house. I mean, we're currently renting this place and I've been renting for 15 years since I started working. And I'm just ready to hopefully save up money to buy a place. Saving up now. That's why I'm working so much. Trying to get everything together. Trying to make things work out. Get a yard for my kids and hopefully a big enough kitchen to put everything we have. My wife cooks all the time and we just have so much stuff when we moved in here that there's nowhere to put it all. So we're going to have all that figured out potentially by summer. I'll be able to move out, but yeah, no video games until then. I need to have my eye on the prize. Also, do you have any suggestions for someone who likes working messy rendering just as much as with super neat line work? The end result is more or less the same, just trying to conserve time. Just wondering if you have any insight. For me personally, messy was how I used to work in it. I would spend like 100 hours refining and refining the messy blobs and everything until it looked like a readable finished piece. It took me forever. So that wasn't conducive to client work right now. Like I can't do that now. It just doesn't make sense for me. So line work, I think a structured approach to knocking out paintings is the way to go if you're trying to conserve time and make things more manageable that way, where you can tell a client, I can deliver this to you by this date. That's how I go about it now. Is I have a structured line approach, which, you know, if you've seen any of my videos, you can kind of see how that all breaks down. That's how I try to focus my work. It's like this very simple breakdown so that I know I can always deliver a similar result and depend on it. But yeah, I mean, whatever works for you. If the messy thing is the same amount of time as the neat line work and all that. Like I'm not doing super neat line work as far as pencils go. Right now I'm doing neat line work in the way that I'm almost drawing with a brush so that it integrates well with a final painting. Like you can't even see the lines that were there because they're just brush strokes. But that's what I would suggest. But that's my own personal thing. if that's not how you think and it doesn't work for you, then don't do it, because that's for, each individual person to figure out for themselves. Thank you, though, for the question, and to everybody else for the questions. Marissa Rainey says, "Hey Dave, hopefully this hasn't been asked before. Apologies if it has. I was wondering, have you ever looked at an artist's work that may have the fundamentals mostly down, but their work doesn't have that spark yet? If so, what would you put that down to? What would you say the artist is missing? Also, do you find yourself more drawn to artists with consistency in their work? Feel free to get as deep or to the point as you'd like." I know what you're talking about, because this is maybe controversial. I don't know. Like, I'm not trying to throw this dude under the bus, but Boris Vallejo, old artist who was kind of a contemporary with Frazetta, he had a great finish to his work, but it wasn't nearly as cool as somebody like Frazetta. Some people just have the thing, whatever that is, the spark you're talking about. Like other cringy things call it like the it factor. It's like, if you have that thing, whatever that is, that confidence in yourself and the style that you produce in that whatever language that you're able to put through your work that is so specifically you, if you have that thing that's just cool, then it's always going to be better than super strong fundamentals. I think that more often than not, what I see is the thing that you're talking about is you get so focused on the academic side of measuring. You measure yourself in that way of like, I won't be good until I render like this, or I have this knowledge, whatever. But I think the best artists get that knowledge and then kind of throw it away. It's not always in the back of their mind when they're working. It's just something that's there. They know it, but then they can throw it away and lean into style in effective illustration than just be perfectly real and correct. I find that artists that are too much in that mindset, they don't have enough of, again, this sounds nerdy, I'm sorry, but like the soul of the work is not there completely. There's something about it that's not there. And like I think similarly to when you see somebody walking down the street and they're just dressed cool. There's something about them that is coming through in how they present themselves, how they carry themselves, how they walk, how they style their clothing, how they do their hair, makeup, whatever. There's just something so uniquely them to everything that they are. They just exude confidence, like you can feel it. And that's almost what makes it cool. It's like, especially when people can pull something off that isn't like on paper doesn't seem cool, but then when they wear it or whatever, it's like, then it is cool. Certain people just have that. And I think that comes across in artwork as well. And you can maybe develop that. I don't know. I think the way that you would develop it is potentially through just constantly trying to further narrow down what makes you you and what makes you, I don't know, what makes you, your influence, all that stuff kind of come together. Whatever that style is, that's you feeling just like, no, I'm good. I'm going to do what I want to do regardless of what anybody thinks. A lot of times that's all it is. And then that energy, that confidence, that feeling of security with yourself comes across in the work and people can feel it. And then that has maybe that spark you're talking about, but I don't know. I know what you mean because you see it all the time. Some people are just very good at rendering, but then they don't have that thing that makes really effective illustrations. It doesn't pull you in, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how amazing you are at painting. If you can't do something that people want to see and pay for, then you're not going to reach that high-end level of artist. That being said, it's not like you still couldn't have a career. I'm just saying there's definitely a difference when you see an artist, and again, like Frazetta, come out and do what they do, and then compare that to their contemporaries and be like, yeah, Frazetta just had that spark that you're talking about for sure. Neo Dragon Knight says, "Hey Dave, what was your favorite gaming system growing up? Do you still own it? I do still own it. It's a Super Nintendo that I got for Christmas when I was a kid. It was the Zelda Link to the Past boxed Super Nintendo, like they came together in a package. We got that and Donkey Kong Country 1. I loved it. It was my favorite thing ever. Donkey Kong Country was the one I gravitated towards. I played the shit out of it. Didn't beat Link to the Past till much later. That was like the game my sister played a lot of. And we just kind of, I was way more into like straight up platformers. But loved it. Still probably my favorite. Chrono Trigger. Really like Final Fantasy 6, 4, all the great RPGs on the system. And then the games that we never got that I came back and played later, like Terra Enigma. It's so much amazing stuff on there. That's just because it's my childhood, though. Other than that, like the PlayStation was my favorite, first PlayStation, just because the sheer amount of games was incredible. But yeah, I had the Super Nintendo. I have a bunch of other systems that are a little bit more niche than that. Like Neo Geo Pocket Color is one of those ones that I was super into as a kid. I gravitated towards all the systems that were the ones that kind of were number twos to everything else. They were like sidelined. And I always thought like, oh, that means that there's something special about them. There's something hidden on them. So I'd always want that. Like, the Sega Saturn, the Dreamcast. Neo Geo Pocket Color. I had all of those, and some good games on there, but most of the time I just ended up being like, I guess I should have got the other thing. Do you remember the only game I didn't get in the Donkey Kong Country series, by the way, was 3, because, and I don't know if any of you listening in the States, you'll know this, that back in the day for Super Nintendo, games had a crazy range in price depending on where you went in the stores. So when I was a kid, most games were like $50, I think. I think that was Super Nintendo back then. I don't think it was 60, it was 50. And I remember Donkey Kong Country 3 was at Sears, and at Sears it was like $80 or something like that. So I was like, oh, fuck that. I guess I'm never playing that game because my parents are never going to pay $80 for a single video game. So this next one, I can't pronounce your first name, so I'm going to butcher it and get on to your question. It is definitely not Jiao. I don't know how to say it. Pedro says, I'm scared of not achieving or not being good enough for the market. I get work, but I always feel like someday this will end and I will be in a really bad position career-wise. I feel this more since my father died a couple weeks ago. It's always this feeling, this fear of the day that I won't make ends meet, to the point that it already is messing with my head and my artwork. I'm not sure if you have been in a position like this. Maybe I should get therapy or something. But I would love to know if you have gone through something like this. I have gone through a similar situation. My dad died when I was 27 or 26. I can't remember exactly. I had a different reaction. Everybody has a different reaction to death, but what I did was I turned that into kind of this, after the initial grief and everything, like a motivational thing for myself. I didn't want to end up like that, just not dealing with my health correctly and having a heart attack or something when I was so young. So I just really pushed myself to get everything together. And my dad was a great guy, but he said this one thing to me before he died, within like the year before that. We were talking about my work and what I wanted to do. And I've mentioned this on Q&As, I think, in the past. But the thing that he said to me was that I always talk about doing the things that I want to do, but I never fully execute them. And people just want to see the thing that you're talking about. So don't talk about things if you're not going to do them, if you're not going to have follow through with everything and make it happen. And I was back then pretty scared to do the things that I said I was going to do, because the fear of the unknown, I guess, of just what would happen if I did it, what if nobody liked it, all that kind of stuff. And when he died, once the dust settled and I was back working and everything, it really hit me, and I was like, oh, I have to do everything I say I'm going to do from now on. So that was when I started doing the Steve Lichman books, and just did those books kind of back to back, and then kept working on my career, kept building up my skills, everything. You know, I understand your position. I understand that you're feeling defeated, you're feeling a little bit hopeless in this, that maybe it's just too challenging, maybe there's just too many barriers in the way. You're living in a time, though, where becoming an artist professionally is the most accessible it's ever been. Now, I don't know if that's positive or not. Sometimes when things are deceptively easy like that, it's easier to not do them. So what I would say to you is that you really have to dive into this 100%. If you want to make it your career, this is something that, and again, everybody, like, regardless of what happened with your father and everything, you are going to feel inadequate about what you do. That doesn't really ever go away. From everybody I've ever talked to who does art, that doesn't really ever go away. You just have to keep going beyond that feeling, regardless of your results. You have to just keep pushing, even if what you're doing you feel like isn't very good, because it's up to you to make your career happen. You're going to have to deal with a lot, and it's not an easy thing to do. It's not easy to be an artist. I will say that when it comes down to artists working in this industry, as far as like top level people, like I know so many of them. Like I don't know everybody, but I know a lot of them. And the fact that I can know a lot of them, it tells you how small it is. But here's the thing with that. Because there's such a small amount of artists at the top, there's way less competition for that top level kind of work. And for the middle ground where you're just making a living doing it, you're just getting by okay, or you're struggling but you're working, that's much harder, because a lot of people will just sit at that level and think, oh, that's the best that I can do, or I shouldn't strive for more than this, or it'd be too hard to get past this. But what ends up happening, and it's kind of weird that it works out this way, is that that's actually a lot harder than pushing yourself beyond that and working and studying and trying to grow yourself and getting your skills to a place where you're at that higher level. Because while it seems like the competition is at the top, it's not. It's at that middle where people settle, because that settle is going to have all the artists. And then only a few will be up here working on all the big games and movies and things. So yeah, I would say to just push yourself. What I did was I reached out to all the artists that I loved online, because social media is super accessible. I asked them how they did it. I didn't ask for anything in return. I just wanted to talk to them, ask them a couple questions, and just kind of, it made them seem less intimidating. It made this Mount Olympus of artists seem more attainable. When I found that they were real people, they were just like me. They just happened to be at a different skill level and be working in these fields. That made it a lot less daunting for me to try and make it happen for myself. And I found that that was very helpful for me to get out of my own head and out of my own way, really, and just be like, oh, okay, this is something I could do. Instead of beating myself up and being like, oh, they'll never be as great as these people, it's too hard. No, it just made it seem like, oh, these are regular people just making it happen. Okay, doesn't seem that crazy. They're a human being. I'm a human being. Why can't I do it? And once I got into that mindset, I found that alongside with working really hard and pushing myself super hard to just keep going and keep going and keep learning, that I was able to get somewhere. And I never believed really that I would get to that level. But in the back of my mind, I always had this kind of naive thought of myself of like, and it's almost embarrassing to say this because I hate ego. I think it's gross. I think when you think you're something, it's bad. But I found that if I deluded myself into thinking that I could be great, I could have a legacy, I could be this amazing artist, when I put that into my head, let me back up. I once heard this thing about the stupidest people in the world are the most successful because they don't know that their ideas suck. So they take their ideas to the finish line all the time. So things that are, like the products they sell on infomercials and that kind of thing. It's like people that, even though people were like, it's a bad idea, you shouldn't do it, they just kept going and naively pushed through. Or maybe they didn't even know it was a bad idea. They were just, numb to that. And then they said, it's good enough, and put it out there. And then they were a success in some way. And I think that you have to have a little bit of that. I had to break out of that mindset of just having like nerves about everything, and just kind of trick myself into thinking that like, no, you're going to be great. And not like I don't know, like a part of me in the back of my mind knows I can do it. But I also never project that out. I would never tell anybody that I was something special. I would never list things I've done. I just quietly in the back of my mind, when things happen that are good, I just go like, oh fuck, it's really happening. Like something's happening. Like that's how it feels. Like, so when I was at like the movie theater with my wife, and we saw the poster I did for Logan in the glass with the lights around it, and I'm sitting there, I'm just kind of like, holy shit, this is another thing. I never saw myself in those places when I was young. But just by believing in that and working really hard and pushing, I was able to eventually get to that level. And I'm not saying everybody's going to get there. I'm just saying that it's possible. And that it's not something like, I'm a human being. I'm like you. I've worked in movies. I've worked in video games. I've done all this stuff. I also used to be a piece of shit when I was a kid. I, got in a lot of trouble, did bad things, like had not the best prospects for life. I failed. I was like the second lowest in my whole grade point average. And yeah, it just wasn't looking too good. Couldn't get into college. Just a lot of things weren't working out. And I just pushed myself and made myself get off my ass and just looked up what you had to study, and I made it happen. And maybe that's all I needed to do, was just be naive enough to push through it. But I will tell you that there's nothing, I think the thing that is special about the people who do get to a place is that they just believe that they can do it. I think that hard work gets you further than anything. You can have some talent, you can have some skill, and that can be a good starting point. But unless you have the work ethic to put in the hours and get through it, then you're not going to make it. So don't beat yourself up too much. Just put your head down, set a discipline for yourself of how you're going to study, and you can make it. You can make it somewhere. If you aim high enough, you may not reach the top, but you'll get closer than if you aim the middle, or you just go like, oh, that's good enough. Just aim at the highest point that you see that you could possibly get to, and you'll get somewhere. Whether or not it's there, who knows? Mr. Briscoe says, would you ever consider doing a wallpaper art for Devil May Cry 5? I don't know. I mean, 1 second, coffee. Sorry, I'm just not sleeping very much, so I need caffeine to survive. I mean, I would consider doing Devil May Cry artwork. I don't know about 5 specifically. I think when it comes to stuff like that, unless I do a wholly different style than what the game's doing, as far as the realism goes, because those games are so real that it's hard for me to kind of break myself away from that and be like, well, why would I do a realistic painting if they do that? Like, the game looks real. So maybe, I mean, I might do like a Devil May Cry thing, but if I were to do that, I would go back to the earlier games. I would go back to like the initial Devil May Cry stuff, because that's just what I grew up with. Zach Maxwell says, hey Dave, I remember listening to you mention in an interview that at a certain point you wanted to work on improving as a draftsman and did so by focusing on drawing comics. Do you think that helped you improve overall as an illustrator, and do you wish you would have done it sooner? I will say, I've answered this before, but the distinction here, the thing is a little different here, is that you asked, do I wish I did it sooner? Absolutely. I wish that I had been drawing since the start. I wish that I had been doing comics. I wish that I made that a focus of mine because I learned so much and it cuts down so much time on my paintings. My God. Yeah, that was my biggest weakness. And I learned all of what I know now, anatomically speaking, by doing comics. And also how to kind of get across expressions and different variety of responses to things like illustrative things. Like you get two characters talking to each other and they have a variety of back and forth expressions, body language, different things depending on what's happening. And if you only do illustration and you're like me, that means everybody's fighting all the time with angry faces. And you can very quickly fall into a hole where you don't know how to do anything else. So that's what I tried to dig myself out of by doing comics, and especially doing comedy, which is just the opposite of angry people fighting with swords, and especially Hentai Garfield. Hentai Garfield is right on the line of angry people fighting with swords and comedy. So I do wish I did it sooner. I wish I did it much sooner, because that would have saved a ton of time. LaVale says, "Yo, Dave, how you doing?" Doing good. I have a 2-part question. Could you please tell me how to build up an audience? And also, how does an artist get commissioned for client work? Is there a specific process to go about? I'm kind of clueless on this. To build up an audience, you got to do a variety of things. I mean, you should have, okay, let's make believe I'm starting from scratch right now. Here's what I would be doing. I would buy the things that I need to buy right away to make it happen. So, okay, I would need a camera. I would need a microphone. I would need a nice computer. I would need the materials, the best materials to do my work, the Cintiq, all that stuff. And I would start a Twitch channel. I would start a YouTube live thing. I would do all of that. I would be making all of the stories and things on Instagram. Even if you have the reaction that I have where I'm like, I'm not going to do that shit. Like, that's how I feel now. But like, if I were really trying to push myself and market like crazy, yes, do all of those things. Do everything you can and just constantly put stuff out. Every day, try and put something out. If you're not working, and then if you're not at a place where you can put things out that are worth doing, I mentioned YouTube Live and Twitch because I would just study live. I would say the same thing I did when I did Crimson Daggers back in the day on live stream. I would say, hang out with me. I'm going to push myself to become the best version of whatever artist I'm going to end up being. And we're going to study all day and just kind of work through this. Well, not all day, but I would do a few hours a day, every day, and study live and just push myself to grow. And I would use the audience that comes from that to move over into Twitter, to move over into Instagram, wherever you are. I would also be on TikTok putting up videos and drawing things from my sketchbook and recording them with my phone with music. There's so many things that you could do to build up an audience. You have to have a central place for people to go. You have to have your portfolio. I would be on ArtStation because that's the place everybody's at. I have a problem with ArtStation simply because, there's like a silly reason that I'm not on there because they banned Mr. Concept Art, which I will never forgive. Never. But that was like a parody account and they banned it. I was like, what the fuck is this? You can't make jokes on this website. So anyway, I would be on there because other people are on there, but you also have to have your own website where you host all your own stuff, whatever, just your portfolio and things, and with like a client list eventually when you do get work. That being said, once you have everything, the way to get commissions, number one, you have to ask. Don't expect that people are going to come looking for you. Tell people you're looking for work. Say like, currently looking for work in your bio with a link to your website that has your email or just your email. Make it the easiest transition possible to hiring you. Don't make people jump through hoops. Don't make people try and find your email. Make it as easy as possible. So don't just, have a profile and be like, oh, I'm going to wait for somebody to DM me. Tell people you're looking, whatever. I would say if you want, I would email art directors. So you could use LinkedIn, look up all the art directors who work for the companies that you want to work for, and then email them directly with your portfolio and try and get work for them. Whatever it is, Marvel, Magic cards, Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know what you're doing, but take your aim and go for it. And then while all of that's going on, just always in the background, be trying to learn, trying to improve, trying to push yourself to the point where you're such a desirable artist that people have to hire you because they need your skill. That's what I would say. It's a lot. Sundog Studio says, thanks for the time you put into your craft and especially for sharing the journey. So much insight. This Patreon is a shining example of the platform's potential. Well, that's very flattering. Thank you. Two-part question regarding remakes. How do you feel about remixes of your art? I don't care. I don't care at all. I mean, of my art, I don't really know what you mean by remixes, but if you're talking like, how do I feel about fan art? I don't care at all. I'm happy if people want to do that. Whatever brings them joy, it's good with me. And then what PS1, PS2 era game do you want to see a full remake announced for in 2021? There's a couple that I would want. I mean, there are some games that won't get a remake that I would want to get a remake, and it's not, I know you're saying PS1. I'll say, because the Final Fantasy Anthology series is on there, I want to see, burped. I want to see Chrono Trigger, and I want to see Final Fantasy VI. Okay, outside of that, what do I want? From the PS Rival Schools, I want to see like a really nice version of Rival Schools. It just had the best like vibe to me. I love the style of it, was really cool. And then Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I don't want to see a new version of it. I just want like a leveled up version so that it works on new TVs and things and looks nice. Aside from those, maybe, I mean, I like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 the most, but I like Marvel vs. Capcom, the first one, for the music. And I would also want X-Men versus Street Fighter. That would be the things that I wanted. Dino Crisis. Sen Ekta says, how's the fam, mate? We're good. Not really sleeping a whole lot. My wife especially, because she has to breastfeed our son. But I it's not the worst, but probably like between 5 and 6 hours of sleep for the past, I think the string I'm on now is like the past week and a half or so. So it's not my favorite thing in the world, but it's not the worst either. Other than that, everything's good. My wife's going to go back to work in March. We have our son, my kid that's just under 2. He's he's already in daycare / school. And honestly, that's thanks to all of you. So thank you for your support on here. I mean, really, it's crazy that I'm able to put my son into a nice school thing like that where they can help teach him things. And yeah, he only went for like a week, and he already like came home and was doing things that we had never seen him do before. And he's just being around all those kids, especially after this whole lockdown thing where he couldn't have other, like it's not that we weren't willing to do it, like to be around other families and things, but just people weren't doing it. So yeah, we haven't had a whole lot of like socialization time with him, just other members of the family coming around. But yeah, it's really nice. It's been great. So yeah, things are going really well. Trying to save up for a house, like I mentioned before. That's the biggest thing now. Hopefully we get there soon. Folin Grady says, I asked this before and I'm unsure if you answered it and I missed it, but I'm wondering if there are any art mediums you'd like to try or have tried, like sculpture or plein air. I love doing sculpture. I used to do that for like little models. When I was doing He-Man portraits, I did Merman. I did a little clay Sculpey model of Merman's forms to get it right with the lighting. Yeah, I would like to do more watercolor. That's the thing that I'm actually going to do some as soon as my schedule frees up any bit of time. But like I said, with the house thing, I'm just kind of, I have my head down, I'm working. But watercolor is my favorite. So if I could do that, I would do it. Crow asks, hey Dave, hope all's good on your end. It's good. My question, sorry, for you is, how did you start off painting? I don't know why you said sorry. How did you start off painting clothes in the forms of muscles, especially the face? Having to paint in the colors while trying to keep the form is still a lot to do at one time for me. So I typically grayscale, then add colors, kind of like how I would draw traditionally. But I feel that like that practice is too limiting. It doesn't get the same level of punch as just slapping some color and going nuts. At least that's what I think. Also, I want to submit a portfolio to internship at Riot or some other game company that is handing those out. But I don't really have a lot, and I don't think I'm at that level yet. Should I still do it? Yes. Take a chance. It doesn't cost money to do it, so do it. So that's just a yes to that second question, which I think absolutely you should do it. Take a risk. How did I start off painting clothes? I did what you did. I did grayscale. When I started doing studies of like photos and things, I would try to do it, and from life, I would do it in color. But when I would do it for myself, I always did grayscale and then would colorize it later. And I'm doing a mix of those two things right now with my current approach. Actually, check that out if you're interested. The persona thing that I just did is that. But I don't think honestly, it helps. There's a benefit in understanding color that way. So you should do it. You should try to push yourself to do that. But it's not a prerequisite to doing anything. If that isn't comfortable for you, or you just want to start even desaturated with the colors and then build up to saturation, you can do that too. But don't beat yourself up and say that you have to do one thing or the other. You should, just to expand your knowledge, but don't make yourself stick to something like let's say you want to do client work. Do the thing that you know you can do well when you do those kinds of things. When you're doing studies, do the things that are a little bit harder because you just want to learn. But don't beat yourself up too much. Let yourself suck at it and just keep doing it over and over until you're better. Nobody is perfect at this right off the bat. Painting clothes in forms of muscles. The reference I talked about earlier would be a great start for you. Andrew Loomis had a whole series on rendering or drawing the clothing wrapping around forms. At least I think Loomis did. There's multiple reference of these kinds of things. Look at runway models, look at people posing in clothes and see how the wrinkles move around muscles. It seems like self-evident when you put it like that. And I get that it would be a question of like, how do I do that? That's not so weird that you would wonder that. But it is really obvious. So just reach out to whatever reference packs you want on the internet or something, or just Google image search and then copy that. Honestly, it's as easy as that. Cariel, I want to say that's how you say the name, says, my question is, do you deal with any pain from your drawing? For example, wrist pains or backache? If so, how do you cope with it? Sincerely, someone currently typing this with a wrist brace on. I try to stop every hour or so, and I do this stretch where I put my arms straight out. I take my fingers like this, and I pull back with my arms straight. I hold that for a little bit, and then I put it down like this. I put my thumb here and my hand over here, and then I bend my hand down like that. And I just stretch, and yeah. Honestly, that's all I do. I try not to, if I feel even a little bit of pain coming through, I just stop and walk around or get lunch or something, or just take a break, because it's not worth it. It's not worth, like you're saying, like wearing a wrist brace. I don't want to do that. So I try to avoid it at all costs. I just take it easy. Even though I work a lot, I do try and stretch and maintain good movement in my wrists and my arm. Yeah, just to avoid that. Dr. Quakenstein Art says, "Hey Dave, I've got a question about some tutorials for Procreate, even short ones, because there is nothing of high quality tutorials for Procreate out there, and you created a bunch of great stuff on Procreate. Will there be any on your Patreon?" I planned on it. I got a new tablet and everything. I got the new iPad Pro and the new Apple Pencil and all that. I just maybe I just need to transfer brushes over to it, because I was using it and I just felt like I I don't know what everybody was loving about it, but I just couldn't get into it. I don't know. What I have going on my Cintiq here is just so much better, but maybe I will do it. Maybe I will do it. If I need to sit down and actively try to understand what's great about it, and then when I can find that, I'll do it. Arnold Ehrman says, "Do you believe in learning all for internet? Because in the times it's the only way." I know what you're trying to say. Do you believe in only learning on the internet? That's all I ever did. Honestly, I never went anywhere. I didn't go to school. Nothing. I went to a couple workshops in the span of 15 years. I went to maybe like 4. But other than that, all learning on the internet with resources I downloaded, with pictures I got off Google. I painted apples on my desk. I folded up clothes on my desk and copied the wrinkles. Very low bar for me as far as what I needed to study. I never had the fancy thing. Like, I just did whatever was near and used that resource. I don't think you need anything else. If you're self-motivated, you have discipline, you can make it happen with whatever you got. Yeah. Bog Sloth says, "Sup, protein golem." Was that like a cum golem? Or, because unless you're talking about whey. "What kinds of things do clients say to you for critiques and feedback? Since I'm pretty new to working, I tend to overthink a lot of stuff. I always make the adjustments they want, but sometimes I think, damn, I suck. They should not have needed to tell me to change that. Also, congrats on the new baby. Parenthood seems wild. Like you boofing a girl and you get all that. It's crazy. It is crazy. Who knew? Who knew that being a protein golem could lead to mini golems?" Okay, let's see. I go, if somebody's paying me to do a thing, generally I don't mind doing revisions. I limit my revisions because I'm not going to do them forever on a piece. So you have to have that in agreement if you're going to go in and you think like, I'll do 2 revisions max, and then you have to pay me extra money. If that's the case, then you have that agreement down and you're at least compensated for the extra work. That's the only time I have a problem with it, if they're not paying me to do the work. Should you have known already? I mean, if it's something that you feel like is apparent in your work and you're consistently getting the same kind of critique and feedback and it's bothering you, then I would say absolutely address that in your work when you're doing your studies and things, and take a note of it. If it's something like my rule is that if somebody tells me something about my work, and not that it offends me, but if it bothers me and I think about it more than a few times, there's usually a kernel of truth to it. And then I go, okay, maybe they're right about that. I should look at my work and be more careful. So then I'll change my approach and do something different. But sometimes it's just, them being really nitpicky. So you got to know the difference. If you can tell that they're just changing things arbitrarily, then that's kind of apparent. Maybe it's more apparent after working for a while, and you get the gist of what clients go for. Like you kind of know who a client is. Like if a client tells you like, "I'm really easygoing," it's like, no, they're not. They're one of the most picky people ever, like almost always. So you can almost guarantee that that's about to get bad, but don't beat yourself up about it. Only if it's something that you feel is halfway correct and that you need to adjust for. But I roll with the punches when it comes to feedback. It's like, I don't care. It's for them. If they're paying me for it, I don't care. I'll do as many adjustments as they want. Esteban Sanchez says, yo, Dave, you ever fit a living animal in your mouth? Bugs count. I probably have. I'm honest. I'm trying to think. God, have I put a living animal in my mouth? Probably bugs. I don't know. It's a good question. Kittens. I put cats in my mouth, and I carry them to their mom, and I drop them into their mom's nipples so that they can eat. Also, I don't know if someone else has asked, but you ever see weird shit in the sky? Some bona fide, unidentified, non-planet side flying objects or little green boys? And then, in parentheses, not goblins. So, let me put an asterisk here. I'm not saying this is UFOs. I'm just going to tell you what I saw. Okay. And not just what I saw, what me and Dan saw, and this girl I was dating at the time. So, we were at the beach, and we were sitting in the sand, and it was sunset, and I saw a light in the sky. It was like super bright. So I turned to Dan and I said, I forget what planet. I had seen something online about how you would be able to see like Jupiter or something, or Mars, I can't remember, in the sky. So I said, hey, Dan, is that whatever planet? And when Dan looked, it wasn't there. And I was like, oh, it was just something like crazy bright in the sky glowing in the middle of the day. So I just assumed it was, at sunset. So I just assumed it was that. So the sun is going down, and I'm like, there was like crazy bright light in the sky. Like, it was wild. So I then see another one, and I go, oh, that's what it was. And I go, I don't know what that is. I was like, maybe it's like a light on a plane or something. So it was this really bright light, and it would glow real big. It would just stay perfectly still in the sky. And then it would move like this, move like that, and then it would zigzag, all kinds of weird stuff. So we sat there on the beach and we just watched this happen. And this is before drones. We were still in high school. So however many, like, what am I now? 33. So go back to when I was like 17 or 18 or something like that. It's a while ago. There was this one cloud in the sky, and they kept coming out of this one spot in the sky. And we ended up seeing something like 40, I think we counted in the 40s of them, and like there would be like 6 in the sky at once, and it was basically the same exact thing you've seen if you've ever seen the lights over, I want to say it was Phoenix, those like YouTube videos, because we ended up looking it up when we got back. I was like, that was crazy, we have to like figure it out. So I looked up lights in the sky, whatever, like glowing orbs, like all these things, and we found videos that other people had taken of similar stuff. So it was really weird. I don't know what it was. It could have been some kind of like military thing. I don't know. But it looked like what everybody said are UFOs. No ship landed. There wasn't anything else. I was freaking out. I called my dad, called my brother. I was like, we're at the beach. I was like, if you can come to the beach, come to the beach, because this is insane. And there were a bunch of other people at the beach watching it. And we like went up to them and said, did you see that? And they were like, yeah, that was crazy. But nothing else happened. I don't know if anybody called the police or whatever. We just left and went home. And then nobody believed us. And I was like, oh, this is what it feels like. I didn't even say UFO. I just said we saw a bunch of lights in the sky. And everybody was like, are you fucking nuts? I was like, nah, man. It could have been anything. I'm just telling you what I saw. So that was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen in the sky for sure. No idea what it was. One went over our heads. It like was really bright in the sky and then shot off, and it went over our head. And when it went over our head, the only thing I could make out about it was it looked like 2 cups that were stuck together like this, like a football. That's about it. That's really all I know. And it freaked me out, but I never stuck to it as like, oh, I definitely saw aliens. Who knows? Could have been anything. Could have been ships. I mean, it could have been like military aircraft. I have no idea. Okay. Josh Newton. Hey Dave, as an independent artist who works from home, do you still use a smartphone? If so, how often are you on it? Do you find yourself getting distracted by it, and do you keep it on you throughout the day, or do you put it in a separate room until you're done working? Also, congrats on the new baby. Thank you. If I didn't have a family, I would not have a smartphone, or I would, but I would just keep it far away. Because my wife needs to get in contact with me, in case of emergencies. I have my phone, like my phone is right here. It's just on a stand, pointed at me. Thankfully, I'm disciplined enough where by doing art for so long and just sticking to working the same amount of hours every day, I don't ever look at it for that reason. I don't waste time on social media, really. The only time I look at my phone is if I'm on the toilet in the morning or, to answer email or something. But other than that, I don't do anything on the phone. I just avoid it completely. Sometimes I'll hook my headphones up to it and listen to music or or listen to a lecture or something like that. But no, it is poison. It's poison for your day. When you actually look at how many hours you spend on the apps and things, you'll quickly realize how bad it is for you and your productivity. I would recommend, if you take your career seriously at all and you think that there's not enough hours in the day to get everything you need to get done, don't use your smartphone anymore. If you're trying to change your life, trying to work hard, grow your career and become something, this thing is death to that. So don't do it. Bruno Diaz says, hey Dave, what is the difference in concept art from movies versus games? How different are the portfolios from each other? What skills are needed for each one, or is it more or less the same? Thanks. I think nowadays it can kind of go anyway with game art. It could be really stylized game concept. It could be really realistic. Depends what you're doing. I think there's a lot of variety. And I think when Gears of War, the first one came out and everything was in that brown, realistic universe, every game was that. I think that's when there was kind of a look for concept art. Now it's way more open and you can have a variety of things. I think movies tend to fall more towards, unless you're working in animation, movies tend to fall more towards that realistic way. They just want to see how the thing will look realistically. They don't want to see your artistic interpretation most of the time. Unless you're Ian McKellen and you have a nice balance between realism but also really artistic. But that's why a lot of people do photo bashing, because you can just so quickly produce concepts that look real because they're based on photos. I think that's the major difference. I think with games, I'm able to get away with a lot more. If you see my most recent stuff that I did for Insomniac on Spider-Man, those concepts are just 2D cell shaded kind of looking things, even if they are rendered real in the game. And that's fine. It works for the game. I mean, they didn't need me to change anything. So I was able to get away with that. And what skills are needed? I mean, it's just, I guess in games, you should have a bit of an open portfolio showing that you could work on a variety of things, that you could do. What I try and think of with concept art portfolios is I try and think of how could you take, let's say you're aiming at a company, right? You don't want to just replicate what they already do. You want to try to do something in your mind that's better than what they're doing, but lives within their universe and their aesthetic that they've already established for their studio and their games. And then same thing for every other style that you're going to go for as far as different game studios. You want to work for Riot on League, or you want to work at Epic, Fortnite stuff. It's then you have to aim for those things. But if you want to work in movies, it's about realism. It's about, making concepts that feel like they're previs for the thing. And then that's kind of what gets you in the door. I got into movies by doing stuff that looked more real. That's what got me into it. When I started doing more realistic lit portraits of pop culture stuff, that's what got me into movies. As well as when I worked on a lot of movie marketing material, and I would have to take things that were really under-rendered, like CG bad, unfinished monsters, and then take them to a level of finish where they could put it on a poster. That was my job for a while. So that got me into doing more movie stuff. Robbie Tilton says, I love your Patreon and have been learning a lot from it. Thanks for being awesome and sharing and showing us how you think about your work and craft. Well, thank you. I would be curious to hear your thoughts on social media as an independent artist and how it's evolved as you've gained a larger following. What has been the biggest benefits of having a large following, and what is annoying about it? For the annoying things, how do you deal with it? I don't get annoyed. I like trolls. I like trolling people. I never get offended. None of that stuff bothers me. Like, I don't think of the interactions that I have on something like Twitter with people I don't know, like rarely, like especially if they're mean. Like, rarely do I ever think of that as even real, because they would never say those things to you in person. And it's like, I grew up around just really intense people and aggressive, funny people who were biting, who could insult you, whatever. And you kind of just learn how to deal with that by being around people like that. So I think that just coming from that childhood experience, I just have no problem with it. Like, you couldn't make fun of me better than I could make fun of myself. So if something like that ever were to happen, which it really doesn't, I just kind of let it go. Like, if somebody's being an ass, I don't block anybody really. I just kind of like shrug it off and go, okay. The biggest benefit, it doesn't really, I don't know, like, the benefit is that there's a higher chance that somebody in a position of whatever hiring position will see you. That's the benefit of a large audience, is that there's a greater chance that somebody who will hire you will see it, your work. That's the best thing that can happen. But other than that, I mean, it's like being able to do something like this. This is like one of the biggest things, is like the fact that there's enough people following me that I can have Patreon support. That's huge. That's one of the biggest things that can come from it. I don't know, like, when it comes to the numbers though, I don't think that matters too much, because, like, let me just say this. I just saw an artist, I think it was a Chinese or Japanese, I think it was a Chinese artist, just posted up on Twitter, and one of their posts got 1.2 million likes. 1.2 million in the first couple days that they were on Twitter. And I think that their account went up to 100,000 followers in like 3 days. So if that tells you anything, it's like, your work speaks for itself. And if the right people see it, you'll explode. And you just have to keep sending lures out there and hoping to catch the big fish. And that's kind of what my experience has been. And hopefully grows. And I don't know, like, people tell you that like there's a point when you get to a certain follower account where like all of a sudden people take you more seriously, and like you have to be outspoken about things, and like, you know, you can't joke around the same way anymore because you have responsibility with all these people. And I just go like, oh, fuck that. I'll just delete my profile if it ever gets to that point. Like, that would suck so much, and I wouldn't want to do it anymore. Like, really? Like, no. If it ever got to that point, I would just go, then just don't follow me. Just leave. Because it's stupid. It's like, then you just don't like me. Like, I'm not trying to just retain followers for the sake of having them. Like, it's not currency to me. But people treat it like that. It's really gross. Chris Pittas, or Pittas, I don't know. Hey Dave, I've been a fan of yours for more than 10 years, and this year I decided it was time to join your Patreon and learn as much as I can from you, since you have influenced me a lot as an artist in the variety of work, of your work. Doing comics, illustrations, concepts, etc. is a dream of mine to achieve. Well, I hope that I'm able to help somehow. My question is if you have ever felt like what you do is meaningless in the grand scheme of things. I find myself thinking regularly about how what I do is useless and meaningless, and that maybe pursuing art as a career was the wrong choice instead of learning a skill with actual real world use, such as becoming a baker or mechanic, for example. I know what you're talking about, and I completely understand that. But maybe it's just different because, okay, let me just say this. Before I had a family, I get what you're saying. Before I had a family, yeah, I'd be like, oh, this is kind of stupid, whatever. But the way that I had to look at it was just, does it make people happy to see the things that I do? And when I'd see something go viral that I did online, or I'd make a comic and it makes people laugh, and like, you never really know how you affect people. Honestly, just reading what you said about how you see what I do and you've been following me for 10 years and that what I do is a dream of yours, that makes it worth it. Honestly, if I'm being completely honest, that's why you do these things, because you might think like, "Oh, it's just drawing goblins and shit." And I make fun of myself for that all the time because I just think it's a silly profession in that way, where it's you're right. It doesn't have like a, in the most black and white sense, if you're not looking at nuance, it's like, yes, it is. It's not practical. It doesn't matter really. But if you're looking at it, you know, areas of gray, it's like, it makes people happy. Like, you give people inspiration or whatever if you're doing something. Or when we're doing the comics and making people laugh, like the amount of messages I get from people that are really sweet, heartfelt things about like Steve Lichman, like it's really moving in the way that like I'm not one of those people that's going to read to you emails I get and be like, see, I am a good guy. But I do get messages from people that are like along the lines of, they were in a place, this got them to laugh and it made them feel good. That's enough for me, honestly. And then having a family now, I don't give a shit. It's like, that's as much meaning as I need. If I'm making my family proud, if I'm able to provide them with a comfortable living and they have all the food they need and everything, it's like, then who cares? Like, I'm doing it, for them. That's what matters the most. And I don't need to be a baker then. I'm supporting everybody and we're good. So I get what you mean, but also I think just by saying what you said, you basically gave a reason of why it's important. Sam Green says, hey, Dave, when it comes to doing a poster or poster-like piece, what is your usual starting point for creating and developing your composition? I work mostly on poster art and feel like that initial stage of staring at a blank canvas trying to come up with an interesting concept to hinge a piece on or composition structure just fills me with dread. I will look at other artists sometimes if I'm really feeling like I'm in a hole. If I don't have an initial idea, I'll look at a lot of classic illustrators just to see if I can't find something people haven't touched on in a long time. Looking at like old Arthur Rackham stuff and, like I mentioned on the Bloodborne video, looking at like Sergio Tappi and just being like, there's something here. There's a nice design language. Maybe I can bring that over into a poster. And that'll be a nice like jumping off point. I try to, if I, like I said, don't have that idea, to look for outside influence. If I can't find it in like Leyendecker or something, then I just keep, taking in inspiration until something really strikes me. But I don't start on something where I just feel like, whatever, like here's just a thing, because those never work out. So I won't really knock a sketch out until I have some idea of an influence or just a general shape design for the piece that feels good. Sometimes I start out and I just have the idea in my head right away. Like when I did the Final Fantasy piece, that was the first thing I thought of, was that design. And I just sketch it in my sketchbook real chicken scratch like, and then go from there. But that's how I do it most of the time, is I try to find if I'm really lost in outside influence. Strong composition is always just the key, though. I'm always looking for compositions that work for the presentation of whatever I'm doing. I mean, I don't do a ton of poster work. I mostly am doing it now just for Patreon. When I do poster work, though, that's kind of what my aim is, and hopefully that works. Sorry if that's not a super complicated answer to your question. I know that working on posters is difficult, but that's what I do every time. Octavio Sosa says, "Hey Dave, just a simple question. How are you?" I'm good. I'm tired. I'm trying to work real hard. I mean, to be quite honest, I'm really pushing myself quite a bit lately. I've been doing the Patreon stuff, and then because I'm trying to just save up money, I've been taking on whatever work feels good to take on. So I took on a small concept art thing. I took on a 6-cover series. I'm on the 6th cover right now. It's just about done. I took on a couple Marvel covers. I took on a couple concepts for another thing, a cover for another thing, a cover for another thing, and then what else was there? There was something else too, but I just I'm a bit over encumbered right now. I'm trying not to let it just ruin me, but I've been it's more so the lack of sleep from having a kid while also working like crazy hours and then having to take care of kids and stuff when I'm not doing that. So it's been kind of wild. I'm not super stressed. It's just that I think I'm kind of reaching my limit. Once this 6-part cover thing is done, though, I'll be good. So I'll be done with that tomorrow. And then I can get back to just like the regular Patreon shit that I want to do while doing if I have one cover to do and Patreon, that's not a big deal. If I have some concept art to do and Patreon, not a big deal. But if I have like 6 covers to do that are one giant painting, and I think right now there's something like 30 characters total on the whole thing, it's like then I'm kind of dead inside. So working through that, trying not to break and just maintain my mental energy. That's the juggling act I'm doing now. But thanks for asking. I appreciate it. Noel says, "Hey Dave, what's the actual size of the canvas you are used to working on? I lost some of the cool texture on brushes such as the Dopus pencil on one of the bigger canvases. Thanks, Dave." I think for working on that kind of stuff with that brush, I tend to not go beyond like 6,000 pixels on one side. But yeah, I mean, depends what I'm doing, I guess. I don't know if you can scale the texture in Clip. Maybe you can, but I don't usually have a major issue with that. But if I'm working on something that's gigantic, I do lose it. And that's when I start to use the other like watercolor brush for inking, because I find that still has a decent texture. Yeah, thanks for the question. I hope that helps. I mean, I really don't know exactly how to fix that right off the top of my head. No Captain Eric says, "Hey Dave, I hope you and your family are well. I started doing digital illustration about 2 years ago, and I want to live as a freelancer. I do not feel that I am progressing so much in the studies I do in anatomy, perspective, and colors. My question is, do you have any tips, a routine or something? I am 2 months in your Patreon and loving all the content. You're my biggest inspiration in art, and I hope to improve and always see your works. And also, I forgot to tell you that I'm from Brazil, so could you come into my house and eat my whole family's ass?" Of course I can do that. I have your consent, don't I? I've touched on this before in previous Q&As, so I will just lightly touch on it here. I would suggest going back to the first Q&A if you want in-depth on this, because that's where I really go into this in-depth. But every morning, this is what I did. I would do about an hour to 2 hours of anatomy, an hour to 2 hours after that of either studying from life, like something on my desk with lighting, or doing a study from a photograph. And that would be all based on me rendering things realistically, getting down colors and making sure that my structure was correct. With the anatomy, I was just trying to replicate what I saw. And like I said earlier in this Q&A, try and do it from imagination. And I did that every day for maybe like, I don't really remember, 2 to 3 years, maybe less, maybe 2 and something. But yeah, that's what I did. That's how I got through it. I just made a structure for myself and stuck to it completely. Same way you'd stick to a strict gym routine, and eventually I broke through. That's it. It was as simple as that for me. And no matter how bad it looked, I just kept going. Chabuddy Choo Choo says, what do you recommend as a good site for portfolio work? I feel that DeviantArt isn't great. ArtStation is what I would say first, for community as well. And then also, I have like a Carbon Made site, which is really easy to use. So if you want that, you can do that too. Second question, early on in your career, when you, career, I don't know why I said it like that. When you ran into a block in your work regarding fundamentals, I struggle with lighting. Would you do a few studies and then return to the piece you were working on? I hope these questions make sense. Sometimes I would do that. Most of the time I would, if I was in the middle of something, I would just reference it. I would find something that was as close to that as possible in Google or something, and then use that. And then after the fact, I would address that weakness in my studies, because I didn't necessarily want to stop everything I was doing, especially if I was like on a deadline, and then try and learn something new. I would just be like, oh, fuck, I'm at this wall point again where I've reached the limit of my knowledge. Now I need reference and I can figure this out. So that's what I did. Frank C says, hey Dave, do you mind if I post a sculpt based on your recent He-Man sketch to social media, including armor and such? Go for it. Absolutely. And number 2, are you planning on developing those He-Man and Skeletor sketches or leaving them loosey-goosey? I wasn't really planning too much for those. I just wanted to knock out some ideas for a He-Man redesign. I wanted to do more, really, but I just decided I would do other things and kind of just abandoned it. I didn't feel super drawn to it. But yeah, probably not more development. Kipto, oh, but by the way, I want to see the renders, so if you do that, tag me. Kipto says, I've been reading Steve Lichtman Volume 1 the past few weeks. I was a backer on the original Kickstarter for the first book, but read about half and never read the rest until now. Man, I was crying from laughing the other night when Dracula goes into the bar to hire the guys to kill Kiefer. The drunk dwarf had me bawling. The script for that comic is so clever and sort of on-the-nose parody, which makes it so charming, and how the story has developed from one-off jokes in the beginning to a full-fledged story arc with all these characters has been so fun to read. Just want to give you guys props for that first. Well, thank you very much. It's really nice to hear that. I felt like after doing that, I was like, oof, maybe we like abandoned those one-off things a little too early, because the story, in my opinion, could have been stronger, or we've since learned how to do it, is what I'm saying. But back then we felt like there was this switch that went off in the middle of the comic because we felt like because it was a book, it had to have a cohesive story. I'm just glad that for you, that worked out. Do you think part of the success of those books is because they are based on popular characters like Dracula and such, even though you totally made them your own? I know you said comedy is easier to sell than serious or action. I look forward to when I can read it at night. Also, I want the second book, but I have to buy both, and I already have the first book. Is there a way to get the second only? Maybe I can send Dan a message on Twitter. Also, do you know that Dan was 2 years above me at UMass Dartmouth Illustration? I studied in the same program as him. I think that's how I found out about you so long ago. He was doing Crimson Daggers like right after school, and I was seeing what he and you were doing. Anyways, there's a couple questions in there. Muchas gracias. Well, thank you. Let me go through the questions. I don't think that the comic is more successful because we use characters that are tropes. I mean, classic characters like Dracula. The reason we used Dracula is because we thought it was funny that Dracula is such a boring idea to include in a D&D comic, and like the Wolfman's in it and stuff like that. We just thought it was funny that you have so much imagination in D&D, and we chose like the lamest characters for our main characters. And we just kind of, I think it works because they're relatable in the way that you kind of know somebody like that. That's what we aimed for. We aimed to just base them in a roundabout way on like people we knew, but almost like an idea of people you know. Like it's like a heightened version of that. So I think that's more why it works than anything. I think D&D kind of just is the wrapping on the outside, because it's mostly just about the characters and relationships. But yeah, you could message Dan about the second book. He probably has an extra one. I didn't know, but that's funny that Dan was 2 years above you. But yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's cool to know that, honestly, it's still funny to see Crimson Daggers pop up in these Q&As, because I just did that so long ago that it's amazing that it's had this long of a life. I wish I could still do stuff like that, but having a family, work, and doing this, impossible. Not impossible. I would just need to get paid enough for it to make sense. Michael Robson is, do you have plans to make more illustration process about other Zelda characters? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm not done with Zelda. I'm trying to kind of get to a place where I have the right kind of illustration. I think like if you saw the Persona thing that I just did of Anne, I think that that's probably the closest I've gotten to be able to be like, oh, okay, if I were to do an illustration again of like a game or anime or something, I'm going to use that style. So when I do Yu Yu Hakusho, it's going to be like that kind of thing. And then if I do Zelda, it'll be more like that. And then I'll share more videos and things. But I'm absolutely not done with Zelda. I still haven't done a Zelda illustration, which is kind of like, you know, Super Metroid was one of those where I was like, eventually I'll do a Super Metroid thing. Final Fantasy VI was like that, and I was like, I'm going to do that. And now that's what Zelda is for me, kind of. It's that thing in the horizon. I know I'm going to get to it. Just when? I'm actually not too far from the end of these questions. I just had to scroll through to see where we were at for time. Okay. Kipto says, also, it's crazy how you have the entire first book and a good chunk of the second book online for free. Are people just really amped to have a physical copy, and that's why the campaigns did so well? Well, the stuff came out online way after the campaigns, but people were just, pretty excited to have the collection because the books are hardcover. They have gold embossing on them. They're really nice paper. Like everything about them is like as high a quality as we could get. Because we're a 2-person team, we could really eat the cost on that. If we had to spread the income from those books across a whole team, it would be a little harder to do. We'd have to go cheaper on materials, but our materials are really high end, like cloth hardcover books with gold embossing and like the thickest paper quality. Like, yeah, you don't really get that with too many other things. So I think people just want them to have them because they look nice on the shelf, really, and, collect them. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe people just like reading physical comics. I like physical books. That's why we made them. Wassom Art says, hey, Dave, I hope you're doing well recently. Thank you. I have one question. Would you mind giving us an insight on what it's like to work in the industry, especially on the side of deadlines? Is there a specific time limit on how long to deliver thumbnails, then line art, rendering? I find my process to be way slower than yours, and I fear if I ever end up working on a serious project, I would be working like 12 hours a day or so. I was too. I will say that first off. I was just like you. I worked all the time. Like I when I had a deadline, I worked crazy hours, and I worked too many hours. And eventually I did that enough where my process sped up over and over, especially as I learned. As I kept studying and learning, it just got easier. So it was difficult for the longest time, and then it got easier and easier and easier by doing it. So don't worry about that. You have to you really have to be pushed with deadlines. That was my fear with Patreon, was that if I got into doing Patreon initially before I started it, I was like, I won't have the same pressure that I get from clients with really tight deadlines to be able to find new ways to get to the outcome of a piece faster. So I think that by taking on the deadlines, that's what makes you a quicker artist. I don't think you become a quick artist and then go in to take work. I just don't. I think that the work pushes you to become better because you feel like you're working up to somebody's standard at the job. You're trying to deliver something quality in the time given. And it's the same thing with term papers for school. You know, you get 3 days to do it. You do it in 3 days. You have a night, you do it in a night. Same thing happens with jobs. So, but most things are pretty forgiving. For like Magic the Gathering, I would say you get a little over a month to do the whole thing. Same thing with the majority of Marvel covers. They give me around a month. I never use that. I deliver way before a month. But I would say most jobs I have give me around a month. Sometimes it's an emergency and they're like, can you get it to us in a week? But that's like the exception to the rule. So they ask for thumbnails, sketches, usually in the first like 2 weeks or week or so. And then that's it. And then the last thing I give them is the final. But it's sketches and then final. And I usually only give one sketch because here's the thing. Biggest mistake I made, and I mentioned this on Twitter early on in my career, was I would send clients multiple sketches of everything that I did for jobs. What that ended up doing was, just because I wanted to show that I was doing the thing you're supposed to do, and here's 3 iterations of the same idea. It's like, yeah, but you know yourself that only like one of those is something you really want to do, and you're hoping they choose it. I stopped doing that, and I was just like, no, here's just the only one I want to do. And if they said anything about it, I would say, I did multiple ones. I sent you the only one I know that I can do to the best of my ability, that I have the most confidence in. That's what I tell them if they ask. So I only send one now. And yeah, it's just like, it's not a responsible thing to send off multiple thumbnails and just be like, you know, here's 2 that don't work, 1 that does, you figure it out. You want to always put your best foot forward, even if it means sending less. I know that's not what you were asking, but I'm just saying. So yeah, I hope that is helpful. Joseph Verde says, hey Dave, hope you're doing good. I just wanted to ask, how do you balance out the way you consume media on a daily basis, like social media, internet in general, or watching shows, movies, etc.? I really admire your consistency in putting out work while at the same time not being completely out of the loop with things. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Thanks. I listen to podcasts, listen to news, rarely watch anything. If I really feel like it, I'll leave on a show, but I listen to it. I pretty much don't watch anything because I'm not trying to get distracted. So I try to eliminate all distractions. That's my number 1 rule. When it comes to doing work, I'm working. I'm not doing anything else. So it can only be audio. I listen to music. Yeah. I listen to just like a handful of comedy podcasts, and sometimes I'll talk on the phone while I work, and that's about it. If I consume anything, it's at the very end of my day, but I haven't done that in a long time because it's been a couple months since my son was born, and I just haven't been doing anything. But before that, I would watch shows. So I would watch like The Mandalorian, just see how it wrapped up, that kind of thing. The thing is that you really, even if you have kids, if my job is working on stuff that lives within pop culture, I have to be on top of it. So when I do have time at the end of the day, or if I take a day off or something, which I rarely do nowadays, but you know, usually if I take a day off, I'm hanging with my family. But let's say I didn't have family at home, whatever, like I would do that. I would consume things just so that I were still living in the current moment, because otherwise you can quickly fall back and just become a dinosaur. So I try not to, because that's also part of my job, is staying current. Yeah. Yeah. Limit all your time online because it's just not good. Only the things you absolutely need. And I try to move my hand while working all day. Kevin Carney says, "Hey Dave, in your first basics video, you talked about how when you first started painting, you just set a bust down under a light and just painted that over and over. Could you speak to that process? I've been drawing with graphite for a while now and want to transition to color, but feel like it's hard to know where to start." When I did that, I would block in the shape. Like I would do it like my tablet's right here. I would have the bust right here with the light on it. So from here, I would just start choosing colors and trying to get as close as I can to what I saw in real life. Was I good at it? No. Did it take me like a year until I was doing things that looked half decent? Yes. So you do it to the best of your ability and just jump in the fire because there's no guarantee that you're going to be great at it. You probably won't be. You just have to start and hope that you figure it out along the way. Yeah. I don't know. I wish I had a better answer for that. There's no real secret to it. It's just to do it. I was really insecure about that stuff, and then I just started doing it, and I eventually got comfortable, and I started to do better things, and my studies came out more accurate over time. Alfred Manzano says, "Hey Dave, what does your wife think of your art? Does she have a favorite?" I mean, she likes it. She's not like I think my wife is more into the side of it where I'm like pushing myself all the time and learning new things. Like I'll show her like, look at this thing I figured out. I'll show her that, and then she'll be like, wow, that looks way more real, or like that texture's really cool, or that's great that you keep pushing yourself. Like she'll say stuff like that. I mean, her favorite stuff of mine is probably like the more stylistic things. She likes the comics. She likes, like Garfield that I did, and she also likes like the Pokemon illustration that I did, like those kinds of things that are more stylized, less of the realism. I think she thinks I mean, I agree with her that like the realism stuff can be a little lamer. So like she didn't care for like the Symphony of the Night thing, which I wouldn't expect her to. It's like you're not supposed to, think that's super cool. And like I'm not the kind of person where like my wife doesn't like something and I go, that means, she hates me. Or I also don't think, oh, that means the piece is bad. I just go, well, why would you like fucking vampires with whips? It's like, it's, not a big, you didn't grow up with Castlevania. So, that makes sense to me. Yeah, she's always happy for me and my progression and everything. When will we expect the videos about how you create comics? I'm super looking forward to that. Well, I was planning on doing them with the Fuck You basketball manga, and I am going to do it with Steve Lichman, but that had to be put on hold because of my son, and I don't want to half-ass any of that. I want to make sure that the comic's cool, so just trying to get over the hump. My goal is that when my son is sleeping through the night, I'll start writing again and start getting back into it. But until then, I'm not going to do my like half out of my mind writing because it just doesn't work out so good. And then Alfred also asked, what's your favorite video game lately? It's getting sleep. It's I play this game called Sleep Therapy. Then I try and use secret breathing techniques to fall asleep right away after I put my son down. Paper Cuervo says, what did you do to study anatomy? I'll skip that because answered already. How often, how focused were you on it when you first started studying? Schedule. The stuff I already mentioned. Sorry for not having new stuff to offer for that question. Max Cloak says, hey, cum guzzler. Was listening to Alex Ross talk about getting his start working in advertising and remembered hearing you mention something similar. Could you give some insight into what that kind of work would entail? It was the thing I talked about earlier about taking kind of the monsters from movies that were not done and then having to make them look done. I would also do stuff where I would kind of use a comic book style to design compositions for posters where they would then go and take photos of the actors in the movies and then place them into a composition like the comic layout that I did. So it would be like a cartoony, almost like poster of like a bunch of versions of what the poster could look like. And then based off of that, that's how they would shoot everything and then put them together for advertising. That's most of what I did. And yeah, the major money stuff was in rendering up all the monsters. Like I would get to name my price, and that was a wild time because I would get a bunch of money. Like in 24 hours, I would get like $4,000 or something like that. It was just so hectic. I couldn't do it for my own health. Like they would ask me to start work at 8 p.m. and they'd need it the next day. So I would get a random phone call, have to stay up all night, and I would just quote them some crazy money and be like, this is how much it's going to cost for me to do that. And I started doing it so often that like while I made a really good living that year, I just wasn't living that year. So I quit doing it completely because it just wasn't conducive for healthy life. It's cool for short-term money, but like, yeah, I probably wouldn't do it again. Not unless I was like, you know, in my 20s as a single dude. It'd be too wild now. Frederick H says, what up, Cremasimo? Hope your family is good and all is well. Would you ever consider doing an office tour showing what statues, figures, art books you keep around to stay inspired? Also, does your office really stink as bad of old farts as you always make it out to be? Really excited for the Bloodborne piece. So excited to see you tackling my favorite game of all time. Thanks again for all the juicy OnlyFans content and hope you stay safe. Well, happy to deliver the OnlyFans content. You got to get on the next tier to see my asshole, to look at my feet, all that kind of wild shit. If you want to see that, just, get the $100 tier. I'll send you Polaroids, the inside of my mouth. I'll put glue on my face. I mean, I would do an office tour, but it's going to be a short office tour. The one thing I was going to do was a book thing and like show you my favorite art books that I have and just kind of, I mean, somebody mentioned that, like materials and that, which I think is a good idea. So I'll probably do that. Now that my camera's working again, I will do that. I'm so happy that it hasn't shut off through this whole thing. It's wonderful. I do have a couple really cool things in here. A lot of skulls, a lot of statues. Balinese door back there that's really, really intense. It's huge. It's like 8 feet tall. So maybe it's going to be a real short tour. It's going to be a real short tour. The wall's like right there. And I have like a bar cart here with a bunch of alcohol. I don't drink it while I work. Okay. Elvis Jose says, hey Dave, I'm taking art seriously only since 3 months, so I'm an absolute beginner, and right now I'm trying to get some resilience and discipline. Basically, I'm practicing to practice as much as possible. So I was wondering, how much time do you spend on all the anatomy, all that? Okay, already answered that, but let's just see if there's anything else in here I can answer. How much on normal just for fun drawings? When you started to take art as your possible future job? Anything outside of those couple hours in the morning that I talked about, do whatever you want. Ideally, you apply what you learned that day to the art you create later on, because otherwise you're just kind of in one ear out the other. So if you're going to be painting some bird warrior that day, maybe reference birds for your study, that kind of thing. So that's what I used to do. The rest of my day would be devoted to whatever work I had to get done, if I had work to get done, or whatever paintings I wanted to do for myself. Yeah, hope that's helpful. I mean, I hope the previous advice was helpful because most of it applied to everything you asked. Andrew Glassman Art says, is that really Gaston on page 206 of the D&D Monster Manual? If so, is it true that No one hits like Gaston. No one crits like Gaston. No one sits on page 206 like Gaston. As a fighter, he's great at intimidating. My, what a guy, that Gaston. That's what you're going to use your question for? How dare you? How dare you, you real son of a bitch. Okay. John Crossland says, hey, Mr. Delicious, no real question. I feel like you've answered pretty much everything that I need to get on the right path. I really love what you're doing with the artwork, and I'm hoping you'll do a Streets of Rage poster or some characters from the original. Would love to see that. I would love to do that. I've been thinking about doing that forever. One thing I've personally enjoyed and I've felt really turned a corner in my drawing was your Wolverine bust you did a video of. It's improved my drawings overnight, and I just love Clip Studio now. Well, that's wonderful. The brushes are amazing, especially the watercolor brush. It's simply beautiful. I posted my Batman sketch on the Discord whip. Hope you can check it out sometime. Let me know how much it sucks and kick my ass a little. Anyway, just want to say thank you. Stay safe, Johnny. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm glad you're liking it because it's a fun program to work in. I love that watercolor brush. I think it's great for, I did that for the whole, for most of the pieces that I've posted on this Patreon, but that Metal Gear one in the beginning was like a major breakthrough for me for that brush. It was great. I haven't been on the Discord because family stuff and work. I am a zombie. I'm dead. I'm a dead body that just paints things. So when I am feeling more normal, we're going to do things. I promise. We're going to do something, challenge things. I'm not exactly sure, but we're going to be more involved and we're going to be human beings together. I just need to get out of the land of no sleep. Mark Nosler says, I would love to see your approach to your most recent Skull and Shark pieces. Sure. Yeah, I haven't been doing the really detailed pen and ink stuff like that on here, but I'm going to get back into that with the comics. So look forward to that when I start doing more comic straight up work. So I have to now look through and make sure I can get through the rest of your comments or questions before I have to end this. Okay. I'm going to stop this in about 15 minutes. We're at an hour and 42 minutes right now. If I can't get through, I will do another video and finish it off. But just wanted to put that out there in case I don't get to your question in this one. Clayson Gomez says, hey Dave, thanks for the amazing content. Hope you're doing well. I got some questions that would help me a lot if you can explain better. I've started digital art recently, to be more specific, in the start of the pandemic in my country around February 2020, but I've been drawing for the past 10 to 15 years, but only as a hobby. Because of this, I'm still learning and looking for answers all the time. Right now, I'm struggling about the software I should use or when I should use it. I know that the bigger part is up to the artist who carries the knowledge and creates their own process. I've been using Photoshop since the beginning, but because of you, I gave myself a change for the Clip Studio, and yes, I loved it. The blend tool, bucket, they're really fun to use, but the most important thing is about my line art. My lines in Clip Studio look way better, sharper, and cleaner than Photoshop. Photoshop looks really pixelized, and that really pisses me off. Not gonna lie. If possible, I would really like to hear something from you about it. I saw one video before that you talked about it. I think it was a Zelda piece, if I'm correct. But I'm in that stage that I need someone with knowledge to explain to me so I can move on and get back to what I'm aiming for in the future. The Zelda one, so the one with Link, that first one, and actually Ganon, I did both of those in Clip Studio using the dopest pencil brush that I have available on this Patreon. So if you go to the brushes tag, you can find that. The one of Zelda I did in Photoshop using the Pulp Inker, which is from Kyle Kyle's brush packs. If you search Kyle's brush packs for Photoshop, you'll find it. It's the pulp inker brush. I use that for Zelda, just really small. He has some brushes that are pretty sharp where you can get that line quality similar to Clip Studio. I still think I like Clip Studio's brush engine better for doing lines, but that's just an idea. Throw it out there. You can get a similar look. It just still doesn't feel as good to me. Okay. Sleepy VV says, my comment looks like it never posted, so maybe double posting. Okay. Have you ever had to deal with a client who asked for changes to a final stage in your work despite having confirmed details with you previously? If not, how would you? Or in the least, would you advise preventing situations like that? Or how would you provide preventing situations like that? I've had clients ask for changes that even go sideways from my art style and can't help but wonder what they expected in the first place. Okay. Well, I've had that for sure. The main thing that I did for that was, okay, so you get the first hit from that, right? The first couple times it happens from clients, you kind of have to learn that from now on, I have to put a limit in the agreement. So whatever you quote them, you have to do the thing I mentioned earlier about saying, I'll only do X amount of revisions before you have to then pay me more money. That's a major part of it. So if you have that in place, it's really not a big deal, because if they keep asking for changes, then they're paying you more money every time. So as long as you're comfortable with that, then it's not a big deal, at least to me. It doesn't happen too often. I know what you're talking about. That tends to go away as you move up through kind of like the tier of clients and get to higher end, companies where they just are, I don't know. It's like people can be too precious when you start out, especially in like the lower end jobs in the beginning. Like that happened to me all the time. They would be just like the thing that they asked you to work on was too close to them. So they wanted control over everything you did. I found that when I got away from that and I started working for clients where it was people that were art directors for a game or something, they were much more detached and lenient, and they let you do more, get away with more, have more fun. That stuff was more enjoyable by far. But yeah, you really have to avoid that just by leveling out of it. Like just work until you're not dealing with clients like that anymore. And have the agreement in place if you are working for those clients, so that they know full well that if they ask you for those things after they've already agreed that the final's the final, that they're going to have to pay you. Was there another question in there? I mean, if they change your work to the point where you're not even doing your own art style, like if they're trying to turn you into another artist so that they can kind of, like that used to happen a lot. Like they'd be like, we're hiring you, but we want you to be this other person. And maybe we don't even tell you that up front. You figure it out along the way. It's like, that fucking sucks. It's like, but when that happens, you just have to finish it, get through to the other side. And if it really bothered you, maybe don't work for them again. Or if you can't help it and you have to work for them for money, then maybe work on your portfolio outside of that so that you can keep on growing, and then eventually you don't have to work for them because you have enough work going on where you can get new jobs. So yeah, that's my advice for that, because I know what you're saying, because people are super picky, but you just have to kind of work your ass off until you're not dealing with people like that, to be honest. Aura Nora says, hey Dave, I'm back to bug you about making a basics video for your study process. Would love to see the way you light, the still life and all that. A lot of questions about studies. I'm really surprised. I mean, it's funny to think about this, because it's another thing you take for granted, where like I'm so used to like how I answer questions like this, right? But it really is something that's repeated in these so much that it's too bad that there isn't just like something out there that tells you what to do. Not that there's any one way to do it, but I just find it funny that like that is still a resource that is hard to find. I think about that all the time with like people going to school to become a doctor. Like I've said that before on Q&A. It's like this example of how there's a roadmap, but there, like, even though it's really hard, it's a crazy endeavor to take on. There's at least a roadmap and some idea that you could do it. And then with something like art, it's like the amount of times that's brought up, like I will do it just because this has been brought up in every Q&A since I started about studies and everything. Like I will break down what I did because I feel like there needs to be a roadmap. I mean, maybe I'll just call it the roadmap and I'll just do a whole breakdown for you all. But yeah, it's really a bummer that there isn't more of that awareness out there, and you just have to kind of like carve your own path and figure it out. It's like you would think, like at least for me, like I would think like after having been doing this for so long, it's like that there would be a general idea of how to go about it out there in the world that you could just kind of find easily. But no, not really. It's so strange. I'm just reading the rest of your thing. So also, I know you must get this question all the time, but can you share your favorite spell or ritual for turning a human being into a meat puppet that will carry out your dark designs under the cold light of the moon? Sure, yeah. I did this to my neighbor. I went over to his house and I took a hammer and I just whacked him in the head. And I said, "You stupid bitch." And I said, "You're going to do what I say now." And then he was like, what? And then I peed into the hole that I made in his head. And the bacteria in my piss is like a little bit of me, and it got into his brain. And then I just kind of, like a little bit of me was in him, so that he was able to turn around and he was like, "I'm you, you're me, we're one." And then we kept spreading that across the whole neighborhood until there was a little bit of me in everybody. And then we move on from there. And I teach my children to do that kind of stuff. It's a special kind of ritual that we do in the Raposa household to maintain our control over our community. Colorful Pup says, "Damn Dave, why you looking so cute? Your wife better watch out because you looking like a real snack." Well, thank you for that. I feel like a snack. I mean, I feel like a fucking ice cream sandwich. I'm trying to lose a little bit more weight because I definitely pushed myself there. 12.5 pounds is my goal. It's hard to tell because I don't gain weight in my face as much. I do a little bit, but when I get down another like 15 pounds, I'll be out of that. I won't look like a snack anymore. I might look like a Cliff Bar, something like that, but not a fatty snack or too much chocolate. Anton Bowden Marty says, "Hello, I would like to know if you have ever played these games Odd World, Abe Exodus on the first PlayStation, and if so, what's the type of console games?" Sorry. What were the type of console games I had as a child? I played that at my friend's house, but I never had it. I wasn't huge into Abe's Odyssey games. The games I gravitated towards were like all of the Mega Man games, Mega Man X onward, and the old Mega Man. I had played the Double Dragon 2 on the NES. Those were big ones for me. Contra. I also was really into, I liked a lot of like the kind of, I don't know, games that were kind of a little bit off of what was popular. I liked like Demon's Crest on Super Nintendo. I liked Sky Blazer on Super Nintendo. I had a whole lot of PlayStation games. I mean, big fan of the obvious stuff like Resident Evil, the stuff that's like almost a prerequisite. Final Fantasy IX was a big one for me. Yeah, I mean those ones are huge, and then the classics like I've already mentioned, Chrono Trigger, those kinds of things. Terranigma. Suikoden 2 was the RPG that really changed how I thought about games. Suikoden 1 and 2, playing those back to back was awesome. Loved the music, story, characters, everything was so solid. The mini games, the cooking game. how you can recruit 108 characters. Man, I mean, really, building that castle was so satisfying. And then all the skirmishes you had, the tactical elements, it's wonderful. Final Fantasy Tactics was another one of those that was huge for me. And then I played so many other, like Shining Force 2 was one of the games I saw where I was like, the style's perfect. That like battle system was great. I could go on and on about that kind of thing. But no Oddworld. Rasam says, what can I do to improve my anatomy? Refer to other question. Thank you for the question, though. Lavelle says, hey, Dave, last question, I promise, for now. How did you go about doing master studies? The master studies were more an exercise on brush economy for me, but I think you have to come at those with a goal in mind. It can't, like, you can just mindlessly replicate the thing you're looking at, right? You could do that. But I would say that if you want to get something specific out of it, I would focus on that. Like, what kind of lighting are they working with? What is this like color scheme they have going on? What's the composition? If you're going for like the texture, if you're trying to match a texture of it, or brush strokes, you're trying to get down the same kind of brush economy and make sure your mark making skills are down. It's like then you have to use all of those things as an aim so that you're not just kind of mindlessly doing the thing. You want to take a lesson from whatever you're working on. That's how I approach them. I did just copy for a long time, and I felt like it didn't really get me anywhere. But when I started to narrow my focus down a bit more, I started to learn more. So one of my favorites was Ilya Repin. So I think it's ILYAREPIN. If you look him up, really great realist painter, Russian painter, really good. Studied his work a lot. In the studies, again, same way I mentioned studies before. Okay. So this will be the last question, and then I will do a follow-up video once I've slept. Promise. Stanislav Aldanov says, hey, Dave, I hope you and your family are good, safe, and healthy. I love what you've been doing since the live stream days. So most parents I know that have even one kid look exhausted and pretty gray. But in your case, not only you seem more joyful and motivated, but your art is better with every piece you post. What's your secret? Have you resorted to magic elixirs spiced with alcohol and chocolate? Are you performing rituals by draining energy from an eldritch god? What is thy secret? P.S. Are you open to doing challenges or some review critiques in the future, similar to what you and Dan did back in the Golden Boy era? I mean, I'm open to it, but it would have to be... I don't want to let you guys down. So if I did do that and I had it open where you could submit pieces, it would be kind of like we would all have to kind of be in an agreement where I would only choose like a couple of them, because I couldn't do it for everybody. And I don't want to put it out there like, oh, it would be for everything. Like I would critique, 80 pieces or something like that. It's like, it just wouldn't work out. Like that would not last for me. I wouldn't be able to make it a regular thing. It would take forever to get through the pieces. So it would have to just be just choosing ones to highlight and just go over whatever ones I feel like would be the most helpful. I'm not against that. I mean, we'll see. The challenges, I think, is a thing that's definitely doable, and that could also include the critiques. But I am open to that. And I've thought about it since it's been mentioned before for the Discord. So I'm definitely looking to do that as soon as things get a bit more regular around here. I mean, I'm glad that I look healthy and I look like I'm sleeping, because I certainly don't feel healthy. I'm not unhealthy. I just need to sleep. I need to be able to get all the work done. It's been such a crazy time. It's, it's a marathon when you have a kid. So you're trying to keep your energy going. And like I have to like really try hard to constantly keep that going. So, I mean, that's why I'm drinking coffee right now. It's like 10:30 at night. Once this is over, I'm working for another hour and a half. I've been going to bed at around 1 to 2 in the morning every night. And so I just have to, make things happen. So, yeah, I mean, doing the best I can, still trying to get in work. I mean, thank God for that school, able to put my kid in a daycare school thing, because it would be almost impossible otherwise. We just don't have any help. And with COVID, it's so hard to get people to help. So I have been performing rituals, like I mentioned, also the eldritch kind of things I've been. When I want to learn, I usually go around the neighborhood, and in a roundabout way, I just kind of ask them, like, you guys, like, this is weird. Ha ha ha. This is kind of, hey, I'm your neighbor. I live up the street. You don't know me, but, and this is going to sound crazy, but do you guys have extra eyes? You guys have extra? And the guy will usually cut me off, whoever the dude is at the house, and he'll be like, eyes? What do you mean eyes? And I go, you got me. Just any old eyes. You're like a dog, your like human eyes. Could really be anything. I mean, like a rodent. And they'll be like, why do you need eyes? And I'll be like, okay. And then I'll leave or whatever. But sometimes they give them to me. I eat them. And what happens is I consume the eyes. They go to my brain. And then once the eyes are in my brain, I'm able to have more insight. I'm able to see deeper truths. And that way I'm able to excel, speed up my process, and grow as an artist. So yeah, if you want to be able to do that kind of thing and, speak to whatever the great ones, it's like, then you're going to have to start, you're going to start finding eyes. I don't know where you're going to do that, but I mean, people have eyes. So that's my focus lately. I'm avoiding chocolate. I mean, alcohol would be nice, but I haven't been drinking that either because I've just been too tired. And I know that's going to put me to sleep right away. So, yeah, I hope that was good. I know that I'm sure my energy's a little weird because I'm just so tired. So I apologize for that. If this was whatever, off, if I seem strange, it's probably what it is. So I will talk to you all soon with the next video. I will continue this Q&A. We almost got through it, but we're at the 2-hour mark now, and I definitely have to take a break before I just piss myself or burn out. So I love you all. Thank you so much for all your support. It means the world to me. It's been amazing the past year now. I mean, it's the year anniversary happened of this Patreon. It's been one of the most transformative years for me in my whole career. So I thank you all for that, for allowing me to do that, and for giving me an excuse to work as hard as I am working now, because I usually waited for clients to push me like this. And since everybody on here is supporting me, I feel that drive to keep delivering things, and it's been great for my development. I honestly feel like the progression has been, it's just, not only is the Patreon growing and things are going good, but when I do get hired for work, it's much better than the work I was getting before. I'm getting paid more for taking on less. So it's just wonderful. So thank you all so much. And I will talk to you soon. And stay safe, stay healthy, and good night or good day. And bye.